testified about the negative impact. Can you elaborate on what exactly those negative impacts that you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am. Particularly in the states that have legalized marijuana, there has been an increase in accidents. There's been an increase in crime in those states. There's been an increase in the cost of emergency medical admits. There's been a statistical increase in the cost for the medical costs. And I believe the Texas Police Chief gave you a document that outlines a lot of those in this graphic form. If not, we can get you one before I leave here today.
And a causal relationship has been found between these negative impacts that you're referring to and marijuana.
There is as you expect, there's a difficulty and associated directly one to the other, but we can tell you, and you have to look at the numbers of what the crime rates. I'll focus on that. Crime, it was a certain level before legalization occurred. Crime rate now after that has gone up in those areas, specifically in those areas where there have been the dispensaries are in place, where legalization, where the concentration of those entities occurred.
Just wanted to make sure I understand. When Representative Moody laid out his bill, he said this bill does not legalize marijuana.
That is correct, and I completely agree that his bill does not legalize marijuana. That is correct. My intent here was to not only to address, I still have to stand in opposition to what he's proposing, but I believe this bill, along with the other 41 or so that have been filed in the legislature so far, are a pathway to that very process.
But everything that you were talking about, you were comparing it to legalization, that this bill does not legalize marijuana. You understand that?
Yes, ma'am, I do understand.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Chair recognizes Joshua Raines. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please.
My name is Joshua Raines. I represent myself, and I am for the bill. As I said, my name is Joshua Raines. I served in the Army in the 101st Airborne, and I did 2 deployments while I was in there. 2008 and 2009 I was in Iraq. 2010, 2011 I was in Afghanistan. In 2011 I went through my first IED experience, which in long story short, summed up, it gave me a Purple Heart and it gave me a lot of seizures afterwards in the military. Now, I did everything the exact right way, which is going to the VA, getting on a ton of cocktails and medications, which is not talked about in the statistics that I've just heard. And it did not work. As a matter of fact, I had a pistol in my mouth. At one point, I was begging my kids to leave me and my wife to leave me because I was just not in the right place to actually take care of them. Anyway, I told you all of that because that's how cannabis benefited me. It allowed me to be illegally alive, yes, but it also allowed me to get off that medication. It allowed me to be a father. It allowed me to be a husband. It allowed me to be here today, which is all things I could not have done without my CBD oil and my cannabis, actually THC cannabis. Now, I understand this bill is not to legalize in the slightest, but I do want you guys to understand how important this bill is to pass, because there are people like me, veterans. There's over 1.5 million of us in the state alone who are the majority, vast majority, are in support of cannabis and getting off the pills that we're on, and we're looked at as criminals. This is a step, yes, in a direction to where we're finally not, we can come out of the closet, we can come out of our house, we can come out and be a normal part of society. He wants to talk about statistics. What about the statistics left out that every single one of those medical states is 25% opioid reduction? In every one of those states, the medical cannabis is legal. 25% opioid reduction. That's a statistic that's in several health journals. CDC specifically states that marijuana has yet to kill a single human being upon consumption. CDC. The U.S. government, to this day, holds a patent on marijuana and cannabis and the medical effects it has on your neurology. And if you want, in the end, I can pull it up on my phone since it's up. I take that very, very serious with the past 2 testimonies I just heard. I'm closing. Because what I just heard was, I would rather them be illegal because it's a stipulation. I didn't hear one bit of actual proof of how it's a gateway drug. You know what wasn't talked about was the fact that we're giving kids drugs. Yes, there's methamphetamines and Adderall, Ritalin, and other things that I was given in the Army. There's opium and opioids, which is where the opioid word comes from. So what is really the gateway drug here? We're giving our kids these medications. Is it really marijuana at that point that's making us all start? I'll close on one last statement. It was said by a very wise caregiver for a child who has autism. It's open your mouth, judge righteously, and defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Raines. Yes, there is a question. Representative King?
First, thanks for your service.
Thank you.
And your family as well. And not contradicting or anything about your testimony, I just want to tell you that what I think that Chief and some of the others kind of alluded to is the fact that if you spend a lot of time interviewing and talking to people that do have heavy drug addictions, not necessarily prescription, but that have street-level drug addictions, almost every one of them will tell you that marijuana was their gateway entry to that. Almost every one of them. And now, so my point is that's why this is such a struggle for the legislature to deal with. Because we hear things like that. We also hear from folks like you. We also hear from people who have children with epilepsy and other things. And then we also, like I had a group of doctors in my office last week on oncologists and also other issues that, hey, while you're here, tell me what we should be thinking on medical marijuana and things like that. And I've done this to a number of doctors, and each one of them each time has always told me, without exception, that the FDA can legalize it at any time, that there's not enough data out there to make medical decisions on it, and that they have synthetics that they feel like do exactly the same thing. But then we have folks like you come in and testify and say things that are very, very compelling. So my point is that just not wanting to criticize or discourage you at all in a way, I'm just saying that it is a very, very difficult issue for the legislature because there is very, 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 very limited data on either side, frankly. And it's just a hard issue for us to work through.
May I respond?
Certainly.
To address the gateway portion, alcohol is considered a drug at this point. Nicotine is considered a drug at this point. So with the actual narcotics that we're giving children and regular people, I received Adderall when I was in the military, as well as sleeping pills to help me go to sleep. And it was just a counterbalance of both. And so coming off of that, I noticed like it was really rough. And it made me, and that inspired me to do more bad things and bad pills and anything that the VA could actually give me. It was cannabis that was the exit out of it. Like to have a gateway into something, you would have to have an experience that's similar to, almost equal effect. So if you were going off the cannabis as your effect, then you wouldn't go to cocaine, you wouldn't go to methamphetamines. It's just not going to be your typical ballgame. When it comes to the government and saying that it's not enough research, if they did not have the research itself, they wouldn't hold patents in the part of Health and Human Services on it. So they have the research, and they have the research in the medical states. They have the research from overseas, from Israel, from Mexico, from South America, and others. So the research is there. It's the matter of the FDA actually wanting to invest money into the cannabis industry. They have a lot invested into a bunch of false cures and everything else, and medications that are doing a lot of harm to people, killing tens of thousands.
And again, I'm not trying to argue with you or dispute the benefits that you found at all. I'm just saying, I just want you to understand why it's such a difficult issue.
Yes, sir.
For the legislature to work through. And we talk to our brethren in Colorado and other places, and they are running into increased DWIs and increased potency and THC and kids getting in it. There's just a lot of issues surrounding this whole thing.
Yes,
and it is hard. It is very, very hard to work through. So, thank you for your service and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair calls Joe Palmer.
Perhaps not in order, but I'm ready anyway. I can pretend to be. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Joe Palmer, Tarrant County, representing myself, speaking for the bill. Thank you, Representative Moody, for this bill. As someone who has been active in the Republican Party for over 10 years, I have attended state conventions, national conventions, and have helped some local candidates. I share this in order to make the point that I'm well informed as to where the party is today versus where it was 10 years ago. To be more specific, where Republicans were ideologically then compared to now. The newer people we see are typically more focused on things like finance than on occasional personal use of marijuana, which is now viewed more as a social issue. When the motion to accommodate medical marijuana was discussed at our state convention in 2012, I vividly remember hearing people say that those seeking this form of treatment for themselves and their children were simply wanting to get high. At the 2018 convention, I didn't hear comments like that. To the contrary, we adopted a resolution in support of expanding the Compassionate Use Act, as well as one calling for the decriminalization of the possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana and setting a fine of up to $100. This particular resolution was approved by 81% of the over 6,000 delegates to that convention. Basic compassion, and for some, a weariness of the arrests, towing of vehicles, and incarceration of thousands of people every year for victimless crimes offer us a valuable opportunity to agree on something for the sake of humanity. Chief Justice Nathan Hecht, in his State of the Judiciary address last month, said, "It is time, actually it's past time, to ensure that defendants who pose no risk to the public are not jailed, and that those who do are." He went on to say, 25 years ago, a third of the jail population was awaiting trial. Now the percentage is 3/4. Most of those detained are nonviolent, unlikely to reoffend, and posing no risk of flight. Many are held because they're too poor to make bail. Though presumed innocent and no risk to public safety, they remain in jail, losing jobs and families, and emerge more likely to reoffend. The toll on them personally also burdens communities, and on top of that, taxpayers must foot the bill, a staggering $1 billion per year to jail those who should be released. Besides the costs, detaining someone solely because he's poor is against the law. It violates fundamental constitutional rights. In 21st century Texas, it ought to be unthinkable. Although his comments appear to be in reference to bail reform, it is easy to see how passage of this bill would help our nonviolent neighbors, our friends, family members, and people we will never meet avoid going to jail in the first place. There are those who will oppose this bill. I would submit in closing that members may not be able to do anything about the for-profit jails being constructed all over our state, but you do have the ability to help more of us stay out of them. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Members, any questions? Thank you so much, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you.
Chair calls Tim Curry.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all for your services to the state. Tell you why I went to jail a couple years ago. I have epilepsy, that's why I went to jail. I was in possession of a tiny bit of marijuana because that's what worked to keep my seizures away. Marijuana worked better than anything. I started having partial seizures in Bryan, Texas when I was going to college there. And not long after that, I moved to San Marcos, go to Texas State. Very first day there, when I was moving in, my roommate said, "Hey man, let's smoke some marijuana." I'm like, okay, sure, why not? From that day on, I didn't have another single seizure for 5 years. Didn't take any kind of medications. Didn't even smoke marijuana every day. I just smoked it occasionally whenever it was around. In 2008, I started dating a girl who didn't like marijuana, so I didn't smoke it around her. Soon we were spending a lot of time together, so I stopped smoking marijuana completely. 2 weeks later, I had my first grand mal seizure. I woke up in the hospital with a black eye, hit the floor. I've had over 30 grand mal seizures since then. Each one's worse than the one before, and more meds are usually added. I'll eventually start taking 4 Vimpat pills every day. This med costs almost $2,000 a month. I can't afford that because I keep losing jobs because of the seizures. Who pays for that? You all do. Taxpayers pays $2,000 a month. Almost $24,000 a year goes to me to keep my seizures away when all I would be able to do was grow this plant, and it would work better than anything to keep those seizures away. Why hasn't Texas opened its eyes and seen what a great plant this is? It's been proven by successful medical use for over thousands of use. In time, it will be proven by legal use everywhere. Right now, it's being proven by many states being added all the time. Patients like me are having great success. Now is the time for Texas to show some compassion for Americans like me and not throw patients like me in jail, but allow us to grow our own, possess it, use it. That's what it takes for me to stay alive. Make a comparison to California, where they've had it for over 22 years and totally legal there. Thank you, that's all.
Okay, Mr. Curtis, you are for the bill?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you clarify your
Yes,
position
ma'am.
for the bill. Okay, thank you so much. Members, are there any questions? All right, thank you so much, appreciate it. The chair calls Catherine Harris. And when you can come up here, if you could state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
My name is Catherine Harris. I represent Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy, and I am testifying in support of the bill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I'm going to discuss three major concerns held by opponents of marijuana reform, which are that it will cause increases in use, crime, and drug driving. Now I'm going to explain why these concerns are not relevant to decriminalization. As Representative Moody emphasized, decriminalization is not at all similar to legalization, and there's limited evidence to suggest that reducing penalties for marijuana possession has any impact on use rates, crime rates, or drug driving. I'm going to elaborate briefly on these three areas, and there's also a one-page document in your binders that provides more information. Regarding use, the vast majority of studies in the US and Europe have found decriminalization to have limited to no impact on use rates for teens or adults. A study funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse looked at 5 states that have recently decriminalized possession and found no relationship between the law change and past-month marijuana use among high school students. There are at least 2 reasons why decriminalization is unlikely to affect use rates. First, a person's decision about whether to use marijuana is more likely to be driven by perceptions about its health risks and social acceptability than its criminal status. And second, decriminalization maintains an illicit market and therefore does not increase availability. So there's no reason to think that Texas would see a spike in use from reducing marijuana penalties. Regarding crime, there's no research of which I'm aware that has found a relationship between decriminalizing marijuana and increased crime rates. There's also no evidence to suggest that marijuana users engage in crime to support their habit, or that the pharmacological properties of the plant directly cause users to commit crimes. And lastly, marijuana-impaired driving is increasingly cited by law enforcement as a reason to maintain prohibition. Some states that have legalized marijuana for adult use are seeing an increase in marijuana DUIs, but because THC, which is the primary intoxicant in marijuana, can be detected in blood samples long after any impairment has ended, reported rates of DUIs are likely to be inflated. But regardless of what the data show in Colorado or Washington, trends in legalization states are not valid predictors of the effects of decriminalization. Drug driving is a legitimate public health concern, but not one likely to be affected by this bill. But it's not enough to assert that decriminalizing won't be as bad as feared. It also provides significant tangible benefits. It will reduce arrests and the collateral consequences of a criminal record. It will reduce racial disparities in drug law enforcement and allow for more efficient use of taxpayer dollars. At least 22 states and several large Texas counties recognize these benefits and have adopted some form of decriminalization. And with House Bill 63, the Texas legislature has the opportunity to enact this policy statewide. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Members, are there any questions? Representative Pacheco?
Madam Chair, thank you. The question is, THC, how long can it be in your system for it to be detected?
So THC metabolizes in a couple of different ways. So the THC that indicates impairment can be tested within maybe 2 hours in a blood test to detect impairment. The problem is that for a lot of law enforcement, they can't actually get the blood test done within those 2 hours. And after those 2 hours, the rates go significantly down, so it's not actually detectable in the bloodstream. However, there's another component of the drug that's still detectable. It can be detectable for weeks or even months afterwards that does not indicate impairment. And so that's one of the difficulties in testing for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, appreciate it. Chair calls Christopher Valenzuela. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, please, sir.
Hello, my name is Christopher Valenzuela. I'm with the West Texas Movement for Marijuana Law Reform from Odessa, Texas. And I am in support of House Bill HB 63. And my reasons for this bill are personal as well as along with the group. As Moody has stated before when he first laid out this bill, I was impacted by this bill when I was 19 years old. I was arrested for less than joint worth of marijuana. And due to that, I lost my financial aid for my higher educational learning. And I lost a job that I currently had employed at the time with a 401k benefits and retirement plan and so forth. Even though with the charge, it was supposed to be expunged from my record and they weren't supposed to go after my work. Apparently the officer after the court date felt that I didn't deserve to have that job, so he went and spoke to them and let them know that he felt that I didn't need to be working there anymore, so they went ahead and agreed with him and let me go. And that was already 3 to 4 months after my initial arrest and following immediately after my court date. Other than that, another thing is the financial cost and burden that it lays on individuals and families. I was lucky enough to benefit that I had a second job at the time, so whenever I got released from jail, I was able to pay off my debt to society for my probation fees and court costs. But many others who aren't as fortunate as I am, they do not have that ability to pay off their court costs. So what happens to them? They end up getting warrants issued out for their arrest, and then it begins a returning cycle of incarceration and failure to be able to get good work to be able to pay off their fines. And essentially, that's everything else that I would have to say about art has already been touched on by others. So, in respect for time for the committee, that is all I have to say. Any questions?
No, thank you so much. Are there any questions, members? Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming down to testify.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You too, thank you. The chair calls Jeff LeBlanc.
Chairwoman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jeff LeBlanc. I am here representing myself, my family, and the Republican Liberty Caucus of Texas. Additionally, I served on the platform committee for the Republican Party of Texas.
And your position on the bill?
I'm in favor. In the past, personally, my son was charged with possession of a small amount of marijuana. While I was grateful that our county chose deferred adjudication with probation over jail time, which was a possibility, this did not stop the negative effects of the charge. While seeking employment as a father of 3 on probation and expected to pay fines, the charge showed anywhere he applied for employment. He was even refused employment at a Dollar General store over this charge. To this day, when applying for jobs that require a background check, he continues to have to produce proof of deferred adjudication and things of that nature. And that's if an employer will accept those documents. Sometimes you're just simply unemployable from the charge. If these charges of victimless crimes are going to interfere with gaining employment of even minimum wage jobs, how can we expect the person to rise above their current situations? And so the criminal aspect of the record is very important to me, which is why I support Representative Moody's bill. As the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus, of course, as was already mentioned, I'd like to remind our Republican committee members that we do have a plank on this. And he did touch that it passed overwhelmingly. I'd like to give you some numbers. 6,212 delegates at the Republican convention in favor, 1,400 against. That is 4 to 1 in favor. Republicans in this being civil penalty. With the Republican platform calling for civil penalty, and in the interest of dispensing justice more in line with a penalty and punishment that fits this situation, the Republican Liberty Caucus of Texas and myself urges this committee to consider this bill. Any questions?
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Appreciate you coming down to testify. Thank you. The chair calls Assistant Chief of Police Ronnie Morris.
Good evening. My name is Ronnie Morris. I'm Assistant Chief of Police with the City of Grand Prairie, and I'm here to speak tonight in opposition of this bill. The Texas Police Chiefs Association, of which packet is being passed out now, I believe maybe you received earlier, but if you haven't, here it is here. They've done their due diligence in researching the issue of decriminalizing marijuana and the relaxing of marijuana laws, and compiled the objective data in that packet from states that have previously decriminalized or legalized marijuana and or loosened marijuana laws. There are numerous myths regarding this issue, and it can be confusing for some and lead them to believe that there is no harm in the decriminalization or loosening of marijuana laws. This bill seeks to decriminalize quote-unquote small amounts of marijuana by making possessing 1 ounce or less a civil penalty. What this bill would effectively cause is desensitizing citizens of this state to the dangers of this harmful and dangerous drug, one small step at a time until complete legalization or decriminalization is achieved. This has been the MO of highly funded marijuana advocacy groups, which unfortunately have succeeded in the states that decriminalize or legalize marijuana. On the point of 1 ounce of marijuana being a small amount, 1 ounce of marijuana can produce over 40 marijuana cigarettes. Until you hold an ounce of marijuana in your hand, I don't think you actually understand what an ounce of marijuana is and harm that it can actually do to people. On that point, the THC potency levels of marijuana have skyrocketed over the last several decades from 5% in the 60s and 70s to now 25% in current day, making marijuana more dangerous than ever to public safety and public health. Provided in the handout, all committee members, that I handed to all committee members, I apologize, will include the objective data regarding the effects of marijuana on crime, traffic safety, marijuana use leading to opioid abuse, increased thoughts of suicide among regular users, contributing to and worsening the effects of schizophrenia and other forms of psychosis, which leads to violence. Some questions I have regarding this bill that I think make it highly dangerous is in them decriminalizing 1 ounce or less. I see no exceptions for when possession is in conjunction with possession of illegal weapons, possession from confirmed criminal street gang members such as MS-13 or Aryan Brotherhood or the Banditos. I see nothing about repeat offenders with long histories of drug possession and or violence, and marijuana that is packaged for sale and possession in drug-free zones, our public schools. So the fact is, marijuana is a dangerous and harmful drug, and if our laws are quote-unquote loosened, it will produce the same results we're seeing in these other states that have legalized or decriminalized marijuana. I'm asking you on this committee, please protect the citizens of this state and do not fall for the myths of marijuana. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Members, are there any questions? Representative Zedler.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Let me ask you this. You know, if you try, is there a way that y'all have seen that balance out this issue that, yeah, we get the idea that we don't want to have people going to jail with, small amounts of marijuana, and at the same time maintain something to keep the widespread use of it and that kind of thing. In other words, so have y'all seen any policies that y'all put in place or something like that so that y'all don't spend an overwhelming amount of time dealing with marijuana and that kind of thing? So,
thank you for the question, sir. Actually, officer discretion on this issue is working rather well. Look, there are times and places for abuse in any number of areas, not just in law enforcement, any other profession. And those instances can be dealt with in using their discretion and not arresting people and sending them through the criminal justice system for small amounts of marijuana, like a single marijuana cigarette or something to that effect. Now, when we go talking about 1 ounce of marijuana, that is not a small amount.
That's right.
But yeah, police officers are given the discretion. This body has given us the discretion to use and trust the police officers to use that discretion. And I've been very proud of the officers in my department and the state of Texas in their use of that discretion.
Okay, so y'all done it basically by allowing the officer that discretion, but I'm assuming that the DAs also wield a great deal of it as well, that trying to make sure that on the one hand, they can have it so that a lot of people aren't going to jail on the one hand, and at the same time, having something to keep a lid on the illegal use.
Right. We're really unique in Grand Prairie. We actually sit in 3 different counties, so we have 3 district DAs that kind of set rules for how we go about this. So, but our goal is not to put people through the criminal justice system who have the small amounts of marijuana. The first time user, I heard the example of a college student having a marijuana cigarette on their possession that ruining their life for 30 years without being able to get a job. That's not who we're focusing on. The list that I gave you, criminal street gang members, people in possession in drug-free zones, that's who we're focusing on with this. And I'll make, if I can, just an example just from last night. We had officers arrested someone with less than an ounce of marijuana. He had a huge violent history and history of controlled substance. And through our training and experience, we know that marijuana a lot of times leads to other things. This gentleman was taken to jail. He was found attempting to hide 10 grams of crack cocaine on him. If this bill had been in effect and it was law, we would not have been able to make that arrest and find the crack cocaine that gentleman was dealing to our community.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to figure out why do you think you would not have been able to find that out?
Because we wouldn't have been able to arrest him for the less than 1 ounce of marijuana.
But you could have done your search still, is that right?
He had it hidden in a very difficult place.
Oh, does this change like the?
As clean as I can.
Okay. Does this change the probable cause or the reasonable suspicion that you have?
Just the bill as it's written right now would not prevent us from conducting a search, as was said a while ago, and actually seizing any marijuana, any that's under 1 ounce. What it would do is prevent us from actually taking enforcement action against the person who possesses it, if that's what the officer chooses to do.
Chair recognizes Representative Moody. Did you have?
Just a couple of questions. So officers can choose to let people go even if they're in violation of the law.
Yes.
Under their discretion, right? Do you have a written policy on those practices, or is it just whatever the officer feels at the time, at the scene, or what's going on?
Sure. We do have a written policy on that, and the officer, depending on what the situation has the ability to make that determination of what's best in the interest of justice.
Okay. Can you provide that written policy to the committee? Your
Absolutely.
department?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your testimony and your service.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all for your service to the state of Texas. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair calls Nick Hudson.
Thank you, Chair Collier, Vice Chair Zedler, and members. My name is Nick Hudson. I work for the ACLU of Texas. I'm here to testify in support of the bill. The Texas spends, as Representative Moody mentioned, estimates go as high as about $750 million a year enforcing marijuana laws. And these laws have largely failed to reduce marijuana use or availability. We've seen an increase year after year. And so, from our perspective, this use of resources is largely a waste, and it also represents a diversion of resources that could be better spent, invested in our communities and mental health treatment and drug treatment, and to provide better services to victims of serious crimes. Not only are these marijuana possession laws unproductive, they are also very harsh. So simple possession of a small amount of marijuana, and I've included an example of someone who's affected by these laws in your packet. You'll hear from more folks. Can lead to up to 6 months in jail, a criminal record, loss of someone's job, confiscation of personal property by the government, denial of college loans that you heard about, and limited access to housing. So this bill would eliminate nearly all of those harsh, potentially life-derailing consequences, while maintaining a civil offense that still holds people accountable for violating the law. And our marijuana laws are also unequally applied, and this is something I just wanted to mention. A report conducted by the ACLU revealed stark disparities in enforcement of marijuana laws in Texas. The disparities were both racial and geographic. Despite equal rates of marijuana use, Black people in Texas are more than twice as likely as white people to be arrested for marijuana possession. And depending on which county you live in, this racial disparity can go as high as 34 times in Van Zandt County. And there are more than 60 counties that have racial disparities that are greater than the national average here in Texas. And there's a map in the back of your packet that also kind of shows those counties. So look, there is no evidence that arresting someone for low-level possession instead of ticketing them improves public safety. On the contrary, evidence shows that because of the life-altering consequences of even a short time in jail, they can make it difficult for someone to maintain a normal foothold on life. Jailing people for low-level offenses can increase their likelihood to commit another crime. There's a significant amount of data on that. So a ticket rather than a criminal penalty is a smarter, safer, more cost-effective way to handle small cases of marijuana possession. And I'll close. So just when you consider the wastefulness and the harshness of the criminal penalties, the disproportionate application of the law to people of color, and the fact that there is no good public safety justification for imposition of the harsh penalties, it's clear that we need to take a significant step towards a more rational drug policy in the state. And we believe that HB 63 does that, and we are grateful for the opportunity to express our support of this bill and respectfully request that y'all report in favor of it.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members? Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Chair calls David Sloan.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is David Sloan, and I'm a criminal defense attorney in Fort Worth, and I'm also on the local board of directors for National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, and also on the National Normal Legislative Committee. But I'm here speaking really as myself. I kind of come to you with a unique background. Before I went to law school, I was a law enforcement officer. When I decided to go to law school, I was a training lieutenant with the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department, but I'd worked my way up through the ranks, and I'm here in favor of the bill, of course. And you know, I came in here with my first list of what I was going to talk about, and Representative Moody just might as well rip that up, and then several other people every time I come up with new ideas. Everybody kind of steals my thunder, and I don't want to sit here and give you something that's redundant. But I'll say this, when I was a police officer, I did my job. I arrested people for possession of marijuana, and I'm going to have to tell you, I felt like I was getting the low-hanging fruit, and I didn't feel good about what I was doing because I was taking this person and putting them in handcuffs and taking them to jail. That wasn't an arrest report I put on the stack on the top of the stack for everybody to see. I stuck it in underneath because I just wasn't proud of what I had just done. I didn't see the harm these people have committed to society. And as a police officer, I didn't ever have to dig the hide of some kid out of a tree because he was smoking pot. It was alcohol. And you guys sell flask in the Capitol store here. Every time somebody comes in here, the naysayers, and they want to talk about cannabis and how it should be illegal, they can't ever just talk about cannabis. I want you to notice that. They start talking about the banditos, or let's drag in some crack, or they have to go and find something to mix with the marijuana to dilute the issues and make it and vilify it. Because on the marijuana alone, it just doesn't work. It's harmless. They say, well, heavily funded, in NORML, the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws. There's only 2 paid positions in the entire national organization. How heavily funded is that? We're not funded. We're here because we believe in it. My practice is over 90% defense of cannabis cases. It's insane for me to come in here asking for you to reduce the penalties on this. It's going to put me out of business, but you know what? It's the right thing to do. We're not asking to legalize. What Representative Moody is asking and what everybody else is asking is let's make a rational decision here. I had a case down in Bryan. I went down there, and there's huge disparity in the way these cases are handled around the state. And I travel the state, you know. And I'm talking to Bryan, and they're talking about, and they were just coming down with some severe penalties on this college kid, and I'm like, why are you guys so hardcore? I thought this is a college town. You guys would be kind of a little more enlightened here. Oh well, we had a case where some marijuana was laced with something, and here again, we come in with this reefer madness stuff. They won't be straight. They won't hold still. And when you hear all these statistics coming out of other states, may I continue?
Well, do you have anything else to add?
Plenty. I mean, to be honest. Or ask me some questions, please. Let me know.
Well, thank you so much. Are there any questions, members? No questions, but Mr. Sloan, we got the idea. Thank you so much. You did bring some valid points, though.
All right.
Thank you so much. Kara Bonin. Kara Bonin, B-O-N-I-N.
She had to drive back.
Okay, Kara's not here, so the chair will call John Bockham. Sorry if I messed it.
Okay, you did really well.
Okay. If you state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, committee members, my name is John Bockham. I'm the political director for Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition, the chairman emeritus of the Texas Young Republican Federation, a previous city council appointed member of the Houston Public Safety Advisory Committee, and an involved member of my community. I'm speaking in favor of HB 63 on behalf of RAMP, the Texas Young Republican Federation, myself, and thousands of other Texans that weren't able to travel to be here today. It's an honor to speak in front of you all. Thanks for what you do for the great state of Texas. Thanks for being here with us all night as we get to this bill, and thank you mostly for holding this important hearing today. I ask for your support of HB 63 to collect the civil penalty for possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana, and to quickly vote this bill out of committee so that we can get a vote on the House floor. The Republican Party of Texas, through our 2008 platform, officially supports a change in policy to create a civil penalty for possession of less than 1 ounce of marijuana. Over 80% of the delegates present at the 2018 RBT convention voted to include this plank in our party's platform. Additionally, over 3/4 of the Texas Young Republicans support this policy based on recent surveys, and it's actually one of our 4 legislative priorities for this legislative session. Many Republicans from all demographics support marijuana policy reform, but young Republicans in particular find the harshness and wastefulness of our current policy to be unacceptable. Young people are disproportionately affected by the harsh realities that accompany a Class B misdemeanor conviction for possession of a small amount of marijuana. Studies have shown that 62% of Texans arrested are teens and young adults under the age of 24. In an already tough economic environment for young Texans, a conviction that results in decreased employment opportunities, inaccessibility to financial aid, and legal discrimination in housing combine to create a devastating effect on that individual's future. Law enforcement officers in Texas know that the personal use marijuana is a low-level priority. Therefore, in counties like Travis, Dallas, Harris County, and others have already instituted policies led by law enforcement to divert low-level marijuana possession from arrest. Our current policy is a costly one in both human cost and financial cost. Some are worried that we will send the wrong message to our kids by reforming marijuana policy. However, many other states have already decriminalized marijuana possession by adults, and this has not led to an increased use in rates of marijuana. Some of the human costs associated with our current policy under a Class B misdemeanor is punishable by up to 6 months in jail and a $2,000 fine, arrest causing missed work or other family responsibilities, criminal charge and possible criminal conviction, a probationary period from 6 months to 2 years, including drug testing, habitation and curfew, loss of driver's license for 6 months up to a year, court fees, suspension of federal financial aid, barred from professional licenses, lost employment and or hindrances to future employment, also barriers to defending yourself by not being allowed to receive a controlled handgun license. Rather than promoting public safety, this policy harms the public safety of Texans by using a tremendous amount of law enforcement resources for a low-level priority. Each arrest also costs the state of Texas through jail and court costs, in addition to the above-mentioned human costs. There are over 60,000 arrests annually for marijuana possession in Texas, somewhere between 4.5% and 6% of the total arrests in Texas. What other offense could we deprioritize that would have such a large fiscal impact and a small impact on public safety? We must stop giving criminal convictions to low-level marijuana possessors, and I encourage you to move passage of HB 63. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. All right. Chair calls Michael Openshaw. Michael Openshaw. Chair calls David Bass. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, sir.
My name is David Bass. I'm representing myself, and I'm testifying in support of House Bill 62.
Thank you.
I'm a retired U.S. Army officer and a veteran of Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom. I served in the U.S. Army for 25 years. I'm 63 years old. I use marijuana as medicine for post-traumatic stress disorder and chronic pain from injuries on active duty. I vaporize 1 gram of marijuana each day. 1/2 gram in the morning, 1/2 gram in the evening. There are 28 grams in an ounce. So I use a little bit more than 1 ounce of marijuana each month. When I purchase marijuana to replenish my supply of medicine, I purchase 1 ounce. This bill would protect me from arrest, incarceration, losing my driver's license, spending money to hire a lawyer, having a criminal record, and other adverse consequences of choosing a natural plant instead of opioids and psychotropic drugs. I'm not a criminal. I'm a veteran, a proud patriot, a homeowner, a father, a voter, a taxpayer, a husband. Who wants to arrest me in Texas? I speak for thousands of other veterans in Texas who use marijuana as medicine. Most veterans are buying an ounce when they purchase it. You don't need to arrest us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bass, for your service to our country. We appreciate you. Thank you for your testimony. I think we have a question. Representative Zedler.
No, first of all, thank you for your service. And let me ask you this, though. You are aware that there is a medical marijuana bill going through that in essence would be all regulated, but nonetheless, people could get legal access to. So how would that work for you?
Yeah.
Wait, sorry. We just want to make sure that we limit the discussion to this bill.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Unless you're for let's just
I will say it would solve my problem and the problem of the veterans in Texas who use marijuana as medicine. That would resolve the issue.
Yeah, so let's just keep it to this bill. But thank you so much. You testified in support of this bill, House Bill 63.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Thank you. Appreciate it. Chair calls, and I'm so sorry, Darush Zamari. If I messed up the name, if you could come correct me, please. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
My name is Daryush Austin Zamhariri, and I represent myself, and I am in support of HB 63. First of all, I want to thank you for your time. I was born and raised in Texas. I've worked in the food and beverage industry for nearly 20 years. I have a degree in business from the University of Texas, Dallas. In June 2010, I was arrested in Tarrant County for possession of marijuana under 2 ounces of a Class B misdemeanor. I was pulled over for a simple traffic violation shortly after 10 p.m., and what ensued could be considered nothing short of racial profiling. The officer said they were looking for young Hispanic males wearing all black, allegedly breaking and entering in the area. Instead, he asked to search me, a young Texan with Middle Eastern descent, just getting off of work and happening to wear a uniform that was all black. I was in my motor vehicle at the time and I had nothing to hide, so I consented to the search like any reasonable Texan, would. They found a few grams of marijuana and I was immediately placed in custody. The immediate impact was staggering. There was a $500 bail, the fees associated with the impoundment of my vehicle, missing work, and the cost of hiring an attorney. However, the unforeseen collateral consequences were far worse. The marijuana-related arrest record made finding suitable housing difficult. It limited my employment opportunities and created a barrier to furthering my education because of the restrictions on financial aid. It is my firm belief that House Bill 63 would have helped my situation. Another casualty of the war on drugs would have been spared, saving taxpayers thousands of dollars. And my story is one of tens of thousands that happen every year in the state of Texas, who are all affected by bad marijuana laws. I will leave the committee with this. It took 6 squad cars totaling 8 officers, including a K-9 team, to arrest me. The question that I asked myself in the back of that squad car is the same one that I asked almost 10 years later. Why are we arresting and prosecuting nonviolent, productive citizens instead of diverting those resources to catch real violent criminals? I ask the committee to support HB 63. Thank you for hearing my experience, and God bless the state of Texas.
Thank you so much. Keep the clapping down. Refrain from the clapping. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Thank you. The chair calls Karen Reeves. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Okay. My name is Karen Reeves. I'm here to represent myself and Syntax Community Outreach. I'm here to testify in support of House Bill 63. I believe no one belongs in jail for a plant. I want to tell you briefly about how prohibition has affected my family. My youngest son wanted to be a Marine reservist just like his older brother, who served 6 years and earned the title corporal. They both spent 4 years in the junior ROTC, so this is something they both worked very hard for, and they're both very dedicated to serving our country. My youngest son had come home for the holiday. After over a year of training, he had earned his title as Lance Corporal, Marine Reservist. He was at the top of his class. However, during what was supposed to be a simple brief visit home with family before returning for his training, my son made an error in judgment. He took a ride from a friend that he knew back in high school. Within a few miles from our house, they were pulled over on traffic violations, and their car was searched after the officer claimed to smell marijuana in the vehicle. My son was unaware at the time what was hidden in the trunk. My son was arrested and charged the same as the driver, the owner of the car. They were both charged with the felony. Now, my son was innocent. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The facts of this case really don't matter. It's the fact that our laws are unjust. No one belongs in jail for a plant. Now, this arrest happened to my son back at the beginning of 2014. He lost his title as Marine immediately after the arrest. He was not even drug tested before they made that decision, and he was bullied and he was shamed by his superiors. My son is not a criminal. He was willing to die for his country, yet he was victimized by unjust laws. With persistent determination by his lawyer, my son's charges were lowered to a Class B misdemeanor. But he had to plead guilty, and he did 2 years probation, community service, and a $2,000 fine. And it's been over 5 years since his arrest, and I'm very sad to say, and I did give this testimony back in 2017, so I'm still distraught, so I can only imagine how my son feels. He still suffers from depression, anxiety, and shame over this issue. My son will never be the same, and he's actually still living at home. At times he's been suicidal. I fear for his future. He's lost hope in his future because of this arrest. He recently failed a background check because he finally thought he could go and get a job, only to be refused employment. Now this has affected my family in more ways than I can express, so please push this bill through this session. It's time. Please, so no one else can suffer like our family has suffered. Unjust laws hurt everyone, and I thank you for your time and consideration in this matter. And like I said, I did testify before, the same exact testimony, and it's still hurting our family to this day. If it weren't for my grandmother helping my son pay those fines, I don't know what would happen. So thank you so much for hearing our testimony today. There's so many stories. My son was only one out of 66,000 other families. That alone should make you stop and think about this bill seriously. Thank you.
Ms. Reeves, thank you for your passionate testimony. We appreciate you taking the time to come down here and be the voice for your family and the 66,000 other people.
Thank you.
Members, are there any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you, Representative Moody. I said President Moody.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. The chair calls Cameron Pinkerton.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Cameron Pinkerton. I'm here today representing myself to offer my testimony in favor of HB 63. I'm sure with the passion of our community, I want to thank everybody for coming out today from across the state. You're going to take a lot of testimony today in regarding the statistics and regarding to the fiscal and moral positivity of a bill like this. So I'm not going to go into too much of that. I'm going to, eventually just introduce myself and offer my support on this bill. I've worked in the field of substance abuse treatment, drug policy reform since I was a 12-year-old challenge course operator for a Christian rehabilitation, substance abuse treatment, and juvenile probation program. It was a nonprofit organization named Changing Course Foundation I worked for. For the past 2 years, I've also worked for a criminal defense attorney, David Sloan, who's also here testifying today on this bill. Throughout my experience, it's become very clear. I speak with people in my office every single day, dozens of people whose lives have been affected, whose lives are being ruined by the prohibition of this plant. The problem is not the plant, the problem is the law. And I see it affecting the members of our community and the citizens of our state every single day. From students losing their college benefits, parents being denied employment or housing, veterans being treated like criminals for possessing this harmless substance that grows from the soil they fought to keep free. I've heard the law enforcement today say that it was that marijuana is one of the largest concerns and that it's a harmful drug when there's no statistics to point that out. There's never been one documented death from marijuana in its history, and it's been used for industrial medicinal purposes far longer than it's been prohibited. This is a bipartisan issue. Decriminalization of marijuana is something that both Democratic and Republican parties are willing to support. We're tired of throwing people in jail for a maximum of 180 days in jail with a potential $2,000 fine and criminal conviction that could affect the rest of their life. I lived in Granbury about 3 hours. I made the trip up this morning about 5 o'clock. I live in House District 60, and I've talked to my representative about this issue numerous times. He was formerly on the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. And, just to introduce, as myself, I'm a normal, fun-loving Texan, aspiring law student, a son, a brother. I'm a guy who manages an office of 5 employees. I sit on the board of directors for nonprofit organizations, and I've yet to even reach the legal drinking age. I'm only 20 years old. I'm just a family-loving guy, with positive and productive ties to the community, and I ask the committee to consider my testimony and all the other testimonies today. It's with the best interest in mind for every citizen in the state of Texas that today I've come here to submit my testimony wholeheartedly in favor of HB 63. Thank you, Representative Moody, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you so much. Mr. Pickering, thank you so much for your civic duty and for your commitment to the state of Texas, to coming down here and to testify. Members, are there any questions for Mr. Pinkerton? Thank you again.
Thank you, Representative Collier. Thank you, committee.
The chair calls Dr. Brian Adenoff.
Brian Adnoff. I represent Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, and I support HB 63. Chairwoman Collier and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this bill. I recently retired after 23 years as a distinguished professor of alcohol and drug abuse research at UT Southwestern Medical Center, and over 30 years as an addiction psychiatrist at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I've since moved to Colorado out of state to be with my family, but I feel passionate about this. I spoke 2 years ago here, and it was worth my time and effort to come down and speak to you again. I've published and spoken widely on the biological effects and treatment of addiction disorders, and I'm editor of the American Journal of Drug and Alcohol Abuse. Speaking as an addiction neuroscientist, there is no doubt that the chronic heavy use of cannabis has potentially harmful effects. But the vast majority of people who use cannabis do not develop a problem with cannabis use. For those users, at least in Texas, the most dangerous effect of cannabis is getting arrested for cannabis possession. The harm that accompanies being arrested for cannabis typically far outweighs the potential dangers of cannabis use itself. At a minimum, the arrest record and conviction, suspension of the driver's license, you've heard it all over the last couple hours, can have severe consequences to even the casual cannabis user. As an addiction psychiatrist, I can also speak to the clinical relevance of the present penalties for the possession of small amounts of marijuana. I really do not know of any. There have been between 65,000 and 75,000 arrests in Texas for cannabis possession each year over the last 10 years, but little has changed in cannabis use patterns. In fact, cannabis users take little notice of the penalties. These laws serve little, if any, deterrent effect. Laws against cannabis use used to be far harsher. These laws did not stop cannabis use back then, and they do not stop it now. I've never had a cannabis user tell me, in my practice, that the penalty for cannabis possession influenced their decision as to whether to use it or not. What influences cannabis use or addiction, or for any addiction for that matter, to nicotine, alcohol, heroin, or cocaine, is its cost, the perception of harm and availability, as well as a user's genetic makeup, their personality, environment, and co-occurring medical and psychiatric problems. The penalty for use plays little role in this decision. In summary, the state laws for possession of small amounts of cannabis do not deter its use. They can, however, cause lifelong consequences to the person arrested. There is much good and no downside to HB 63. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? No. Representative Zeppelin?
Tell me, I'm sorry, you were at Southwestern Medical School?
I was.
Okay.
I wouldn't have be able to tell you that if I was still there.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did y'all look at marijuana use and schizophrenia?
I personally have not, but I'm aware of the research that you...
Okay.
There is evidence that people that are predisposed to schizophrenia, cannabis is likely to actually induce psychosis in that population.
It enhances it, is that it?
It makes it more likely to occur.
Okay.
So if you have that predisposition.
Okay. You don't know how many people are predisposed to that?
Pardon?
You know how many people are, what percentage of the population is predisposed towards
1% of the population has schizophrenia, so I imagine it's a little bit more than that. So the predisposition primarily comes from a family history.
Okay.
I mean, and we don't know, I mean, there's biologic, I'm sure there's biologic differences,
sure,
but we don't really know what those are at this point.
Okay.
So, but it's still a small number of people.
Okay.
And I know we're trying to stay on the decriminalization. This really isn't about. I don't think this bill is about that. The Compassionate Use Act maybe, but this bill is not. There are, as I said, there are potential dangers to cannabis, and I don't want to deny that. You can become addicted, but the consequences of use are far greater. The consequences of being arrested in Texas for use,
Okay.
I believe are far greater than the health consequences.
Okay. Listen, thank you very much.
Members, are there any questions? Other questions? Thank you so much, Doctor. Appreciate it. The chair calls Judge John Delaney.
Madam Chair, members, my name is John Delaney, and I am for the bill. I am a retired state district court judge. I live in Bryan, Texas. I've been a judge for 35 years. This is my third trip to speak to this committee, first on House Bill 507, then 2 years later, A81, and now 63. The year I graduated from high school, that's got to be a good omen. So, I handle child abuse and neglect cases. That's what I do. 3 counties. What's called a senior district judge. I'm assigned to these counties. That's what I do all day long. 15, 20 cases. The people who come before me, the parents of the abused and neglected children, have one thing predominantly in common. The common denominator is that they're poor. And the reason that they're poor is they don't have any money. And the reason that they don't have any money is because they don't have jobs. And the reason they don't have jobs often is because they have a criminal conviction in their background that happened when they were 17 or 18, or they had their driver's license suspended because they had a drug conviction. And there's a very black story about suspension of driver's licenses. In Texas, if you go to jail, you get out in 6 months if you have a 6-month sentence. But in Texas, if you have a 6-month driver's license suspension, that is your minimum time that you're going to get suspended for, right? It goes on indefinitely until you jump through a lot of hoops, including getting an application filed, paying a $100 fee, taking a 15-hour drug education course, and get expensive SR-22 insurance.
Let Mr. Delaney testify.
Dr. Adnoff is exactly right. Possession of the drug and the use and consequences of using a drug physically can be bad, but the legal consequences of being arrested and convicted for possessing the drug are far more draconian. The American Pediatric Association, the American Association of Pediatrics, agrees with Dr. Adnoff. They've endorsed this type of decriminalization. But let me add something new to the perspective if I can. I have enormous respect for these men who wear blue uniforms and a badge and a sidearm, and they're sworn to protect the law. They run toward trouble. God bless every one of them. But I tremble, frankly, when I think about them exercising their discretion about whether to arrest a college kid and ruin his life compared to a 17-year-old minority kid who is full of attitude and spunk. Which one's going to get taken down to the jail? I'm sorry. They're wonderful people, but they get angry. These are police officers, and they can ruin a kid's life in an instant. And we're not talking about whether marijuana is good for you or bad for you. We're talking about what the consequence of a low-level possession is going to be. Are you going to go to jail tonight and get a record for a lifetime, or are you going to get a citation and a penalty? There's nothing wrong with this bill. There's everything wrong with the status quo, and this bill would change a little bit of it. It's all good. It's not bad. Questions if you like.
Members, are there any questions for Judge Delaney?
Thank you kindly for your service. You're very demanding.
Oh, wait, there's a question from Representative King.
Of course.
And thank you, Judge, for being here. And this is a difficult issue for a lot of us to work through, at least for me. Okay. And so, and I understand the issues. At the same time, you take like a Harris County jail on any given day, they have 10,000 people in the county jail, 3,000 of them are there on Class C misdemeanor warrants, most of which don't really serve any purpose for them to be there. And I get that. Are you concerned, because I've got a little bit of fines on things, they just get ignored and never get paid. And how do you go out and collecting that? How do you see the enforcement side of this? Because same problem on traffic tickets. Nobody really thinks anybody ought to go to jail for a traffic ticket. When people don't pay the 3 and 4 tickets they've got, they go on and on. Eventually, you don't have anything to do with put them in jail. And so it's that same kind of thing. How do you see this playing out if it's a civil? Because I agree with you. One of the problems you got on low-level drugs or anything else, that our jails are filling up with those, and not always is there a need for people to be in jail for those situations. But how do you go about? What do you see the enforcement issues on this when it's a civil fine? We can't even get people to pay their toll fees.
I agree with you. It's a problem. But the alternative, keeping the status quo, is a known evil. It wrecks people's lives. So let's fix the known evil and worry about the possible issues that arise with the new plan. That's my response, the best I can give you.
Well, that's a fair response.
Okay.
Any other questions, members? Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all for your very demanding service.
Thank you. Chair calls Louis Nakamoto. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, sir.
Hello, my name is Luis Nakamoto. I'm representing myself today, and I am in favor of the bill. And what I have for y'all today is just my testimony. I am a 28-year-old small business owner from San Antonio, Texas. I was raised by a U.S. Army veteran and a hardworking immigrant. I have been taught to treat everyone with respect and love, to work hard for everything that I want, and help others along the way. I started using cannabis when I turned 18 and decided to take control of the depression I had struggling with after my father passed in 2005. I have been arrested twice in Texas for much less than 1 ounce of cannabis. The first time in 2014 at a checkpoint in Sierra Blanca County. I spent 36 horrendous hours behind bars in completely inhumane conditions. I know it's not the Hilton, but toilet paper everywhere, used razors, and the guards smoking in the room the entire time I was there. Wasn't cool. I had to fight with my court-appointed lawyer to fight for a fair deal. It costed me well over $2,500 and created a criminal record, which also results in consequences outside of the courtroom, many of which you are likely to hear about today and have heard about today. The second time was in May of 2016. I was pulled over for a headlight on my way to get my mom flowers for Mother's Day. A completely different experience, however, still very unpleasant. After 12 hours, it took almost a year to fight with a hired attorney. The expense, and it was about $2,500 as well. These experiences have not only impacted me financially, but they have also tarnished my perspective and relationship with local law enforcement, as it's hard to trust people enforcing unjust laws. We've been talking about leaving it up to officers' discretion. And being from San Antonio, sure, we're working on something too. D.A. Gonzalez is working on something. La Hood was working on something, but that's not happening in Comal County or in other counties like the officers that came to testify against for today. So that's what worries me. I'll be okay. I stand here before you as one of the lucky ones. I did not let these experiences define me or deter me from my goals and aspirations. But I can say that for the other about 70,000 Texans that are affected every year. So I stand here feeling empowered by these experiences to push for a better future for the generations to follow. We are not asking for the world, but the world is asking for change, and I believe this would be a small step towards a better future. And I would just like to add that obviously current policies are not working. I did a personal report for San Antonio because I'm from there, and we saw a 40% spike from one year to another, from 2016 to 2017. From 2013 to 2017, it was a 60% spike. So these could be return offenders, but obviously what we have in place is not working. And in 2005, we allowed certain areas to opt into cite and release, but it didn't eliminate the criminal record or any of that. And we haven't seen too many municipalities actually take hold of that or use that. So that's why we're here today, and we're hoping that this committee can push this forward and get us a hearing so we can create change in Texas.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you so much,
for your time.
appreciate you. Chair calls Jason Walker. State your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, sir.
I'm Jason Walker. I represent myself and I support it. I'm Jason Walker, retired Sergeant First Class from the U.S. Army. I've served in multiple combat deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I served from 1997 to 2017 whenever I was medically retired after being diagnosed with severe PTSD. I'm 100% disabled because of that. April 2017, a VA doctor refused to refill my prescription of my 3 milligrams of Lunesta. My first visit to the psychiatrist, and it was my first time getting my prescriptions filled since I retired in May of 2017. He explained that he could not prescribe Lunesta because it was having for me, and he could prescribe me Ambien. I stated that I had some severe adverse side effects while I was taking Ambien before, and he told me to have a nice day. I traveled to Big Spring, Texas to get my prescriptions filled. I was on 10 different pharmaceutical prescriptions at this time for PTSD. I refilled all my other medications except for my Lunesta. I have debilitating nightmares of collecting limbless, dead, sometimes faceless casualties out of military vehicles. It's part of my PTSD. Sometimes those faces turn into my family members. That doctor robbed me of my sleep and turned my life to an even worse place to be. One night I thought I couldn't take anymore. I decided I had enough of the pain. I decided to kill myself. I had a friend that was worried about things and that I've been saying to them, and they called the Midland Police Department. I was living there at the time. They sent some officers over who were combat vets, and they stopped my plan. I moved back to Killeen, Texas shortly after. Didn't say anything to anyone about what had happened. I told my wife and kids I wasn't able to make it on my own with my condition, and it was best that I moved back. I confided in a veteran friend about my sleep and nightmares, and he suggested I try cannabis. I tried it at night and had some of the best sleep I had in years. I woke up feeling rested, something Lunesta never did. I was very amazed. I started to notice that I wasn't having nightmares as well. This had such a huge impact on my life. I started weaning myself off the other pharmaceutical medications I was taking. I took my last Klonopin on December 7th, 2017. That was the last time I used pharmaceutical prescriptions to treat my PTSD. I've had numerous battle buddies kill themselves after they returned from combat. 2 of them were in the last 90 days. They were both on active duty. 22 veterans killed themselves a day. I was going to become another statistic. I was going to become that statistic because I trusted the system that was put there to take care of me when I returned home from fighting wars. I trusted blindly like so many other veterans have. That system failed me. The veteran community didn't fail me. The cannabis community hasn't failed me. I'm not a criminal. I could get arrested for choosing to live. I could be taken away from my wife, my kids, because I use a plant that is legal in 33 states for medicinal use as my medicine. Texas arrests and prosecute people like me for having small amounts of cannabis. There are thousands of people just like me choosing to medicate themselves with cannabis. I shouldn't be treated like a criminal for healing. Texas should not be filling jails for low amounts of cannabis possession. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Walker, thank you so much for your service, and I'm glad that you're able to have some relief. Members, are there any questions for Mr. Walker? Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony. Chair calls Jose Ramon. All right. If you state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill.
Okay, my name is Jose Ramon. I'm in District 13, and I am for the bill, House Bill 63. This is my story. In March of 2018, on the way to the DFW Global Marijuana March, me and my father were pulled over, harassed, and the officer found 2 joints in the vehicle, which I claimed to be mine. We were both arrested and charged with less than 2 ounces. Both had to pay bond. I am still currently fighting the case. I go to trial on March 11th of this year for 2 joints of cannabis, which means the state is going to spend up to 30 grand for 2 joints of cannabis. 30 grand of taxpayers' money to take me to trial for 2 joints. Seems like a total waste of time, money, and effort. When there's a lot bigger fish to fry. I believe that every Texan should have safe access to the medicine of their choice. I don't believe anybody should go to jail for a plant. I don't believe anybody should have to leave their hometown, city, or state to gain safe access to medicine of their choice. We have access to alcohol and tobacco, which has killed hundreds of thousands of people every year. But 0 deaths from cannabis have ever been reported. Cannabis is known to save many and many lives. We have been lied to long enough with all the reefer madness and propaganda. I would like to see that the members of the board here put patients over profit, your constituents that could have been healed by cannabis instead of killed by pharmaceuticals. In legal states, underage cannabis use decreases. Crime rates have went down. Also in legal states, they are successfully using cannabis as an exit drug instead of being as an exit drug to get people off of other drugs, pharmaceuticals, opiates, and other such drugs. I am here not only to ask that you please do your own research and pass this bill on, as well as take a look at many other cannabis bills that have been filed in this 86th legislative session. I thank you for your time and hearing what I have to say. Sincerely, Jose Angel Ramon Jr.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Stuart McMullen. Stuart McMullen. Chair calls Lori Zabinski. Good afternoon. Good evening. State your name, who you represent, your position on the bill.
Hi, my name is Lori Zapinski, and I represent myself, and I'm here to testify for the bill.
Okay.
So thank you, Chairwoman Collier, and committee members, and thank you for having us here. Representative Moody, thank you for authoring and submitting this bill again. I'm a 53-year-old mother, grandmother, homeowner, technology worker. I was arrested for an insignificant amount of cannabis, 3 grams, in a container in my purse when I was in my late 30s. I was a single parent at the time. I was treated like I was a violent offender. Spent the night in jail, took a deal in court for another day in jail for a total of 3 days in jail, which included my arrest jail time. I had my license suspended, had to maintain an SR-22 to get my license back and pay fines to the DPS. I have Class B misdemeanor possession of marijuana conviction. I have been ridiculed for being stupid for using cannabis. I've been called a stoner, been told things like, just imagine what you could have been. It's really kind of demoralizing. I gave you each a nickel so that you could hold that in your hand. And the nickel weighs 5 grams. I went to jail for 3 grams. An ounce of cannabis weighs 28 grams. You hold 6 nickels in your hand, that's how much an ounce is. Just food for thought. I have type 2 diabetes, I have severe neuropathy. When I spend time working in California, I am able to use a transdermal patch that does not have any psychoactive effects, and it completely gets rid of the neuropathic pain in my feet. I do not take opioids and will not. I do not take gabapentin. It's also used as a psychotropic drug. So 90% of the time I'm in pain. I'm not a danger to society. I'm a productive member of society. I pay taxes, I work hard. And everybody else has pretty much covered everything else. So, do you have any questions?
Great illustration. Thank you so much. I'll give your nickel back to you.
Honestly, I'm not worried about the nickel.
Yeah, we're not permitted to take contributions.
Okay.
I mean, we're open and it's just like right in the middle of the.
No, it's just so that you can actually have that.
We'll collect it for Hunter. It's spelled right there. We'll get it to you. But thank you so much. And remember, any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you so much. Chair calls Loretta Buster.
You got your 2 cents, huh?
With interest.
Can you pull the microphone down so I can hear you?
I'm in favor of House Bill 63.
Can you start over? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
My name is Loretta Buster, and I'm in favor of House Bill 63.
Are you representing yourself?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Sorry. In 2011, my daughter Sabrina was preparing to graduate high school and had been accepted into college. She was all set with several small scholarships from local businesses when she was arrested for cannabis. Less than a quarter of an ounce after the arrest, her guidance counselor informed her that several of the businesses had backed out of it. Her scholarships no longer. She was no longer able to receive scholarships. She gave up her dream of becoming a forensic scientist and now is a general manager at Walmart. Approximately 6 months ago, my son Matthew, 22 years old, was caught consuming cannabis at a roadside park. He had less than 2 grams in a pipe. The officer asked his name, and when he told the officer his last name was Cervantes, the officer instantly requested ICE backup. He asked my son if he was born in the United States. When my son reached towards his pocket to get his ID, he was slammed to the ground. Handcuffed, there was bruising on his body and chin. My son was born in Mano, Texas. He was detained and released with a fine, but the impact on his psychological well-being was detrimental. He no longer trusts the police department. It is my belief that taxpayers' dollars can be much better spent on more important issues, such as domestic violence. My children and I suffer from PTSD because of domestic violence, and we use cannabis as a medicine. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I trust that you make the best decision for everyone. Do you have any questions?
Ms. Buster, thank you so much for being courageous and coming to speak to us and provide your personal story. We appreciate your time. Members, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
The chair calls Heather Fazio.
Good evening, committee. I appreciate your service, being here late tonight, one of many, I'm sure, as we make our way through the legislative process. My name is Heather Fazio, representing Texans for Responsible Marijuana Policy, here in strong support of Representative Moody's House Bill 63. I have distributed a binder here that I am not going to go through, but I want to highlight a couple of things. One is, we heard earlier about really the patchwork policy that we see throughout the state of Texas now because of the prosecutors, local law enforcement utilizing their discretion to mitigate the harm caused by our bad state laws. Prosecutors understand that prosecuting these cases is not worth their time. It's not worth the opportunity cost by letting domestic violence cases, for example, go without the attention and resources they deserve by moving forward with prosecuting people for low-level marijuana possession. We're seeing them understanding that the harm caused by a criminal record often causes recidivism. It causes people re-offending,
and it does not create a safer community in their area. This patchwork policy means that someone can be prosecuted very harshly in one area and a slap on the wrist maybe in another, or nothing at all because the prosecutor doesn't want to move forward with any kind of prosecution. In spite of seeing most of the metro areas moving forward with the diversion program, Texas still arrests tens of thousands of people every year, with an estimated 2/3 of them ending up with a criminal conviction, hindering their access to education, employment, housing, all of that for a lifetime with a criminal conviction for even a tiny amount of marijuana. A majority of Texans agree that it is time for a change, regardless of political affiliation. I'm very pleased to be working with people from all parts of the political spectrum, knowing that this issue is somewhere where we can come together and find agreement in moving forward with a sensible policy. We have a lot of information we've provided here as backup, resources in this binder. One thing I want to draw attention to is we've heard from several members of law enforcement tonight for and against this legislation. We have a law enforcement perspective tab here with folks that weren't able to make it. We've got a retired district court judge. We've got a retired lieutenant from the Houston Police Department. Folks that weren't able to make it on short notice for these hearings, but wanted you to hear their experience in law enforcement, how these laws are a waste of resources, and how Texas can move forward by passing something sensible like House Bill 63. Thank you very much for your consideration, and thank you again, Representative Moody, for your leadership on this. Thank you.
Members, are there any questions for Ms. Fazio? Thank you, appreciate it. Chair calls Chaz Moore.
I won't be too long. I know y'all ready to get out of here because I'm ready for you to go. Chaz Moore, Executive Director with the Austin Justice Coalition. I'm actually a coalition partner with Heather Fazio and Texans for responsible marijuana policy. Like I said, I don't want to be too long. I just want to reiterate some things.
Your position on the bill?
Oh, for it. I'm sorry. First, I want to just go on record and thank Representative Moody for being a champion in this arena for quite some time. It was a lot of opinions stated today, and I think we have to be careful with that. Opinions are what led to like the 1992 crime bill that was passed because people were saying black people were super predators. So there's no data, there's no scientific approach, there's no anything that proves that marijuana is a gateway drug for anything. That is an opinion. Example of facts are Beyonce is God, the Beatles was the greatest boy band of all time, and I'm going to happy hour as soon as I get out of here. Those are examples of facts. And to Representative King in his absence, I was recently awarded this award, Nonprofit Leader of the Year here in Austin by some tech company that I've never even heard of with a bunch of swanky people in the room. And I didn't win that award because I do things that are easy. I didn't win that award because I do things that people like and not because people like me. I understand that you all have constituents back at where you, back in your district, wherever that is. But you also have a greater responsibility to do the right thing for all of Texas. So, I think we've been having, and like, this is not legalizing, right? I've heard even the people speak for the bill tonight. I think it's a lot of confusion about what this bill is actually going to do. It's just going to prevent a lot of people from going to jail over something that has never killed anybody, but that has separated and has caused a lot of harm in a lot of communities throughout the state. And I will say, as a nonprofit leader who's, my platform and my job is very minute compared to you all's, you have that responsibility to make hard decisions. So I just want to go on record and thank the legislators that made hard decisions many moons ago to free slaves. I want to thank the legislators that made hard decisions a very long time ago that gave women the right to vote. I want to thank the legislators that made the very hard decision for our schools to be integrated, and they were never popular at any time. So I just want you all to recognize that you do have the responsibility at times to make hard decisions. That's part of your job, and I encourage you to think about your legacy. Like, what side of this legislation, what side of this process in 2017 will you be on? Because that's how you're going to be remembered. So thank you for your time. It's really early in session to be here so late. I will drink a beer with your name on it. I got you.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions? Appreciate you, Mr. Moore. The chair calls Nathaniel Cherwinski.
My name is Nathaniel Serwinski. I'm here for all the vets, all of the minorities, and all of the younger generation that cannot be here today. I'm a cannabis connoisseur. I'm an expert on cannabis science. I actually graduated recently from the Academy of Cannabis Science.
And your position on the bill?
I'm for it, obviously. Houston, I personally believe, that's where I graduated from, and we were taught that everybody has an endocannabinoid system. So that means that anything with a vertebrae also has one too. We produce these chemicals naturally within us. I can link you guys to a vast amount of resources to help you find that information, or you can Google it. I'm located here now in Austin. I was arrested by a state trooper through an illegal search on the side of 71. My car had popped a tire, and my battery had died when I was changing it. For less than a gram of my medicine, I was given about $4,000 in fees, including having to seek legal aid for a Class B misdemeanor. They tried to screw me over hard in Washington County about 8 years ago by trying to tack on a device of criminal intent onto my charge as well, which is also a misdemeanor. They were trying to go for the harder charge. I think personally that the only reason that I didn't have to stay in jail longer than 24 hours is because I'm white. So my personal point is that there is a vast racial disparity when it comes to this issue. There are people that are incarcerated still in jail for this plan. It's been proven in other states that this has been defined as a medical issue. Since then, it's been tough finding work for myself. It's been tough supporting my son, who is 7 and autistic, and it's been tough supporting my family, including my grandfather, who has cancer. I asked the state trooper for help, and that's essentially what got me in trouble. As I walked over to him whenever he was issuing a citation behind me, and he decided that he wanted to ruin my life. I'm here to appeal to your logic and your better nature. In regards to decriminalizing cannabis, there are a lot of misconceptions about cannabis. This stems from racism, oppression, and misinformation. For instance, the word marijuana is Hispanic slang and has been used in multiple documents when it should be classified as cannabis. So we're issuing and arguing about terminologies from 70, 80 years ago in the 1930s. Okay? Here I have attached a document of a man called George Trout. You can read his story. He was trying to start up hemp in the 1930s, and he was trying to work with Hispanic migrant workers and the black community to try to further hemp production. So we're not even talking about medical cannabis, we're just talking about hemp, to try to improve this economy. And he was met with such backlash that he died whenever he was trying to get this pushed within about 2 months. So in 1936, he had a grant for about, I think, personally $100,000, which is equivalent to about $2 million today. And he was shut down within about 10 months and died. So I would like you to read this, this attached paperwork, and hopefully people like me and stories like mine are taken into account. I would hope that you guys could see that this is an issue of racism and disparity, and that the only reason that I'm here and I'm able to talk right now is because I'm white, and that's ridiculous. There are people that are still in jail for this that should not be there. So again, I'm here to appeal to your better nature. I thank you guys for listening to me. I know that I sound a little, confrontational, but this is a very big issue to me because I still have people that I care about in jail.
Members, are there any questions? Thank you so much. You can leave that there, we'll get that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Freeweed.
Thank you. David Reynolds.